Hi, welcome to the Botanical Biohacking Podcast. You came at a good time. Why? Because we're going to go over what it means when an herb is cold or hot, whether it's cool or warm. These terms sound like the medicine of Galen and Hippocrates. It sounds like something you may hear in the jungle. It sounds very pre-scientific, right? I get it. However, it turns out that this may have something to do with gene expression. And sometimes looking through this lens can give you a massive shortcut into very complex disease patterns. Antibiotics are beautiful and life-saving, and I'm thankful to the scientists who continue to refine antibiotic therapy. The modern world really rests on antibiotics, and in particular modern medicine. If you want a difficult surgery, it rests on this foundation of antibiotics. It wouldn't be hyperbolic to say that they have saved countless lives, as in we really couldn't even count how many lives antibiotics have saved. I want to make it very clear that I'm not anti-antibiotic simply by being probiotic. It's important based on the time, based on the situation. Sometimes people need a heavy dose of antibiotics. And I started treating a woman named Cathy after she had much needed antibiotic therapy. It was fairly routine. She had a fever, just came down with something. She took the antibiotics. Afterwards, she felt cold and mentally foggy. Now, if I'm taking antibiotics, I also feel cold and mentally foggy. The challenge with Cathy is that it didn't go away. And she began to get some weight gain and really just kind of lost her energy and motivation to move. So she did what most of us would do, that you're going to think, all right, I've got to get myself in shape. I want to get healthy. So she starts eating fruits and vegetables. She starts her morning walk with a green smoothie, and she adds some cayenne pepper and turmeric because there's an article talking about the capsaicin helping to regulate blood sugar and turmeric, which is apparently good for everything. Hint, it's not. Her weight continued to climb, and she also developed irritable bowel syndrome. So she went to her GP, and GP suggested antibiotics. The GP suggested probiotics. So she took the probiotics, and sometimes she noticed that they were helping, but most of the time they really didn't. The worst part was that while she was exercising, she would find herself just getting tired and out of breath. And you know how when you start to exercise after a few days, maybe at first you feel tired, but then your energy picks back up. For her, she was only feeling worse. She wasn't feeling better. It wasn't improving her stamina. It wasn't improving anything. She was just feeling worse with exercise. And to make matters worse, her memory was getting decreased as well. And her ability to function at her job was starting to lose its edge. So in meetings, she would have to kind of just speak less and kind of hide that she was a little bit mentally dull. And she's somebody very intelligent, was known for having really quick wit, bright ideas, and all that was just gone. So she was kind of not wanting to let on that this was slipping. She didn't want to be in a position of losing status at her job, losing her job. So she had to kind of work around this. When she came to see me and told me what was going on, it was very clear to me what was happening. Everything she was eating was cold in nature on her microbiome. I used herbal formulas like Fu Zi Li Cong Wan and asked her to start her day with ginger tea. Both of these are incredibly warming for digestion. In addition to this, I taught her how to do massage on her belly until she burped a few times, and then after that suggested that she begin her walk. And until she got those burps and really kickstarted her digestion, I wasn't really a fan of her partaking in lots of exercise, especially if it was uphill. So I suggest she just kind of take it easy and not worry about weight loss so much, but moving in such a way that she developed a light sweat and really got the burps going. And I also suggested warming foods for her, even like having warm oatmeal in the morning is going to be better than something with a cold temperature, but also to lean toward foods which have a warmer thermal nature. And this has to do with the way that they affect the gut microbiota. And it turns out it may also influence gene expression. So within a week, she started to feel mentally clear. Some of the water weight she was holding on to started to fall off. After a few weeks, she started to feel great. She was feeling better than before. She became more outgoing at work, and she was kind of trying to make up for it. When you kind of let yourself slip a little bit at work or with your social group, you start to perk back up. You kind of got to put a little more into it. So that's what she started to do. And, she was kind of standoffish before, so she's sort of re-entering that social circle. After a meeting, her colleagues were, like, hey, let's get some frozen yogurt. So she thought, hey, yogurt's a probiotic, right? So it's got to be good. Turns out it was not. So yogurt is still cold in nature, and it was tipping her toward that side. So she started to feel herself relapsing within about an hour after eating it. She was scared at first. She thought that it would really lead to more mental decline. Then she remembered that there were key concepts at work. It wasn't just that she was taking medicine. I'd spent a lot of time really educating her on what to do in these situations. So she was able to take care of this without seeing me because she had herbs in her purse. She took her herbs and started to drink some warm water. So the frozen yogurt is cold. First thing she can do is warm it up with warm water. She can take herbs, which are going to be warming in nature, to counter that frozen yogurt. After about 20 minutes, she had a very respectable burp in her car, and her head started to clear up soon after. As her microbiome became warmer, she could tolerate more foods, and she became less sensitive to her dietary choices. This is important. You can start with an elimination diet, and a lot of people in natural health, a lot of people who look at gut microbiomes, they do the elimination diet, right? This can put you into a cage of increasing incapacity. So what we want to do is really address the root and then make it so that she could have a beer and go get some frozen yogurt, and it's not going to be the end of the world, right? Ultimately, we're looking for resilience and the ability to enjoy life rather than having to hide from it. So for Cathy, it was an incredible turnaround. It looked like this mysterious gut illness, but to my mind, from the perspective of Chinese medicine, it was just, she was too cold and I just warmed it up. Simplest thing in the world. Most Chinese grandmothers could do this. It really didn't require a high degree of education to do this. And yet, I've seen people come back from Mayo Clinic with no answers because nobody could do this. So just because Chinese grandmothers can do this doesn't mean that it's well known or well understood. And part of it is because it's wrapped up in this kind of pre-scientific esoteric seeming language, like what's hot, what's cold. It seems like nonsense, right? But really, every Chinese medicine doctor out there, every acupuncturist has probably had a case exactly like this. So it's not that notable or special. And these problems are perplexing for people who use medical systems which don't observe heat and cold in the microbiomes. So I know Ayurvedic medicine, a lot of Zapoteca medicine, a lot of medical systems do this. But when you don't have this vantage point, you get these really crazy, weird-looking diseases which actually aren't that difficult to treat once you know how. So we tend to observe cold and heat through a few pathways, such as symptoms, mainly symptoms, and you can also take the pulse, look at the pulse. If the pulse is very rapid, it can be indicative of heat. If it's cold, it can be a little bit slower. So it seems to affect heart rate and the pulse quality as well. So a pulse quality that's a little more forceful tends to come with heat, but not always. We can also look at the tongue. So the tongue that is reflective of more of a hot situation will be a red tongue. It might have a yellow coating. The facial coloring will also be a little more flushed. So, yeah, I get it. If this is new for you, this sounds like the medicine of Hippocrates and Galen. It sounds pre-scientific and perhaps even a bit barbaric. And yet, there is evidence to support it, which medical doctors of all varieties would be very wise to pay attention to. So, don't get me wrong. It's fun to have everyone scratching their heads and then swoop in like Dr. House and help someone get their lives back with a very simple intervention. It makes me feel amazing. I can do little to nothing at all, and I've just saved the day. Look at me, I'm a super doctor. However, it is much more fun when people aren't suffering to begin with, And even better, when people say, hey, you know this concept that you taught my mom 10 years ago? I've been applying it and I got over my food allergies. That's a lot more fun. It's fun. It's the most fun when it starts to really affect the culture at large, and when that knowledge can really enhance a whole family and go for generations. That's really beautiful. That's what lights me up way more than looking like, the super practitioner. So when we look at tests on hot herbs and cold herbs in mice, they found that the rectal temperatures increase when you give them hot herbs. In addition, the tongue's polymicrobial biofilm tends to be more rich with bacillus when there is a yellow tongue coating traditionally associated with heat. To add another layer to this, some of these bacillus will start to hijack the hypothalamus to turn up the body's temperature because they like it tropical. So not only is it reflective of heat, it's reflective of the types of bacteria which like to turn up the heat. And yet, there's still another layer to this, and that is gene expression. This morning, I was really excited. I saw an article published in Phytochemistry Letters. In the article, laconically titled, Identification of Pathways and Genes Associated with Cold and Hot Properties of Chinese Materia Medica Based on Bioinformatics Analysis by Wang Yue and Li Yuhuang. They found that 6 hot herbs and 6 cold herbs showed significant difference. The difference between hot and cold herbs was mainly reflected in metabolism, immune function, the endocrine system, cell proliferation, apoptosis, and blood circulation. So this is really why we have pattern differentiation in Chinese medicine. Whether there is cold or heat will influence blood circulation. Just think of all of the diseases that influences. Autoimmune disorders, immune activation to fight latent pathogens. As it affects the nervous system, we have a clear pathway for mental optimization and neurokinetic approaches to orthopedics. Many times we'll address cold and heat in the body and even in the gut microbiota to influence body pains, especially those which are due to idiopathic causes of fibromyalgia. And we can do this just by warming the gut. There are a lot of times I'll just work with diet and drop fibromyalgia pain and help people with fibromyalgia increase their energy, increase their muscles' ability to exercise and not just get fatigued, but actually to recover and get stronger. And this has to do with the mitochondrial myopathies, which are often associated with these prolonged forms of gut dysbiosis. So cold and heat are very important differentiators we use particularly with tumors, which we can see in hot and cold herbs affecting cell proliferation and apoptosis. So since the earliest times in China, written on bones, written on tortoise shells, there are prescriptions for specific types of tumors relating to hot tumors and cold tumors. So by working with heat and cold, we can help regulate metabolism as a whole, and even in very specific areas like very particular types of tumors. Now, I'm not saying that a warm herb is going to just fix a cold tumor. It doesn't work like that. There's a lot to it. There have been specialized schools of Chinese medicine that existed over 2,000 years ago, which were dedicated to very specific types of tumors, and one herb wasn't cutting it. There were whole cascades involved of herbs being processed in very particular ways to bring out new chemical compounds. At the time, they weren't aware of those compounds, but today we can look at it and go, holy crap, that was incredible. A lot of area for exploration there, a lot of area that the whole world would benefit from knowing about. So, when looking at gene expression, they found that differentially expressed genes from cold herbs were upregulated in hot herbs, and genes downregulated in cold herbs were upregulated in hot herbs. So they weren't just increasing the heat, they were turning down the cold, and vice versa. PRKACA, PRKACB, PRKCA, ADCY, and PIK3R1, and MAPK1 were the core genes involved with whether it was hot or cold. The hot and cold herbs chosen in this study, this is really interesting. By looking at cold herbs, which actually have a variety of different functions, and then separating out hot herbs, then they could get a good idea of how it was affecting genes strictly through temperature regulation. Or I should say that was the goal of this study. More studies would be amazing. I'm sure it will further elucidate what's going on. The cold herbs used were huangqin, amazing herb, huanglian, another great herb, coptis, zhizi, lianqiao, kushen, and longdansao. So very cold herbs. They're working through slightly different mechanisms, but they're all getting the job done. For hot herbs, fuzi was, of course, used, and that was one of the herbs that I used with Cathy was fuzi li zhongwan. And this fuzi is also the herb which was tested in increasing rectal temperature in mice. Another herb which was used in this study was ma huang, Herba ephedra, rougui, which is a kind of inner bark of cinnamon, raw ginger, which we all know and love, or you should love it, and yinyahuo, which is horny goat weed. I think that's a conventional name for it. And chenpi, which is a citrus peel. So with TCM, we look at excess and deficiency of pressure systems. We look at temperature and moisture and relative location of disease. And this is called the 8 principles system. This is kind of the core strategy for diagnosis in Chinese medicine. And as we start to explore it at a deeper level, we can see that temperature involves gene expression. And I just wait in anticipation for understanding at a deeper level what the pressure systems of gases and fluid in the body relate to, and concepts such as excess and deficiency, so that we can share these unfair diagnostic advantages that TCM holds with the rest of the world. Because at that point, when we really open source it, that's when it can start to come back and we can advance one medicine as a whole and really serve people with the greatest impact. Thank you so much for listening to the Botanical Biohacking Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Miles. If you like this information and you'd like to learn more like it, check out botanicalbiohacking.com and look into our AeroBiome Mastery program. It involves gasotransmitters, gut microbiota, protocols from some of the most handsome doctors in China, as well as additional information from specialists like herbal pharmacologists, which is constantly updated. So this is really everything that I wish that I had 20 years ago. This is just everything I wish that I could have had access to. And this is the bridge that we've created in order to really open that floodgate of information. So we're constantly updating it with more interviews and more information from incredibly brilliant people in China. If you're interested in this kind of material, check out AeroBiome Mastery Program at botanicalbiohacking.com.